Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. And welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. At the beginning of the first segment, I explained that I had to run a rerun last week because we had a death in the family. We're back at it, as Chit from social media would say. And what we did was I had recorded the episode from my hotel room in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I was moving my son into college. And the topic of that show was the 10 Big Anti-Israel Lies, which is the title of a book by Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz is a #1 New York Times best-selling author and really a brilliant attorney who speaks about jurisprudence in the United States. As a matter of fact, when I was in college, although I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, one of his books was the one that we had to read. I can't tell you what the name of the book, but at the same time, I'm going to go, we only covered the first 5. I'm going to cover the rest of them, hopefully in this segment. The 6th accusation is Israel is engaging in forced starvation, but in reality, Israel's done more to feed the civilians of Gaza than any nation while responding to the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. The International Criminal Court of Justice brought charges against Prime Minister Netanyahu, accusing them of forced starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. And in its indictment, the ICC relied heavily on a report by key Integrated Food Security Phase Classification IPC organization that's warned a famine would break out between March and July of 2024, but by June of 2024, there were no reported deaths as a result of starvation. Later, the study was revised, stating that assumptions were wrong and acknowledging that the supply of food has increased to Gaza rather than decreased from March to June of 2024. The truth is that Israel is not the reason why food aid did not reach the Palestinian civilian population. Hamas is. In the first 6 months since October 7th, Israel and its allies provided nearly 375,000 tons of humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians through land, air, and sea. 18,000 trucks carried aid into Gaza. Israel, with the help of its allies, airdropped more than 1,200 packages. Are these the actions of a country that employs starvation as the means of warfare? Doubtful. But by contrast, Hamas blocked every entry of food. They stole it. They even attacked food trucks. There is a starvation going on in places like Sudan. And as the New York Times reported, as many as 2.5 million Sudanese may die as a result of starvation. And this was by the end of 2024. The book has come out last year. The Sudanese military refuses to allow UN aid convoys to enter. So why are we silenced because of it? Why is the silence of some leaders in various communities, it's deafening? But immediately after October 7th, before Israel engaged in any kind of military response, BLM across the U.S. universally sided with Hamas. I have a problem with that. As the war went on, BLM leaders, as well as those of other prominent activist groups, accused Israel of war crimes, including genocide, while not expressing comparable concern for the situation in Sudan. This is very interesting. Why are they doing this? Is it because we're Jews? I don't know. But that is not an accurate statement. Another one, Israel engages in an illegal occupation of Palestinian territory. but the occupation of their territory is not unlawful. It's clearly established by international law and the law of war that a military occupation resulting from legitimate war may continue as long as the belligerency persists. When the Allies occupied Germany and Japan following the defeat of the Nazi and imperialist regimes, belligerency quickly abated. Nonetheless, the occupations went on for 7 years in the case of Japan and 11 years in the case of Germany. Had the defeated soldiers offered resistance, the occupation may have gone on much longer. There's no doubt that in the West Bank and Gaza, resistance and belligerency persist. Terrorist organizations, cells, and individuals are continuing to fire rockets, plant bombs, shoot, stab, and ram Israeli soldiers and civilians, both in Israel proper and its territories. Israel has the right, actually an obligation, to protect its civilians by maintaining military occupation. In an effort to promote peace, Israel made a mistake by ending its military occupation of the Gaza Strip as distinguished from civilian settlements in 2005. The result has been thousands of rockets, terrorist attacks, and most recently, the barbarisms of October 7th. It should not repeat that mistake by unilaterally ending its military presence on the West Bank while terrorism persists. It's repeatedly offered to do so in exchange for peace, but the offers were not accepted. Until the belligerency ends on the West Bank, the military occupation will continue because it is necessary to save life. The civilian settlements raise different and more complex issues. So Israel's, quote, illegal settlements in the West Bank are a barrier to peace. The issue of civilian settlements in occupied territories raises different and controversial, nuanced issues. First, is the West Bank occupied as distinguished from disputed? Scholars are disagreeing. Those who argue that it is not occupied as a matter of law point to the fact that the area never rightfully belonged to any recognized legitimate political entity. It was captured by the British from the Turks during World War I and became part of the British Mandate. The UN then proposed to become the Arab part of a two-state solution. Arabs rejected the UN proposal and attacked Israel. Following the War of Independence, Jordan illegally occupied the West Bank until it was captured from them by Israel after Jordan again unlawfully attacked Jerusalem in 1967. Since then, it has been subject to dispute. In Resolution 242 of the UN Security Council, Israel was required to return, quote, territories, end quote, not all territories, it captured from Jordan. But Jordan did not want the West Bank back. It allocated it to Palestine, a non-existent, abstract entity with no governing body that was ruled, quote, ruled by terrorists. Now, the Palestinian Authority claims it, but they've been unwilling to negotiate a resolution that's given it more than 90% of disputed land in exchange for recognition and peace with Israel. This is the current disputed and unresolved status of the West Bank, and under these circumstances, with this complex history, it cannot be stated categorically that all civilian settlements in the West Bank are clearly illegal. Consider, for example, Etzion Block. The Etzion Block, which is just south of Jerusalem, has been disputed since it was first established before the creation of Israel in 1948. Beginning the year before, in 1947, Arab armies laid siege to Jewish communities in the bloc, and on May 13, 1948, after its residents surrendered and came out with a heads up, the Arab fighters massacred 127 people. When Israel retook the bloc in 1967, descendants of the original residents asked Israel's labor government to resettle the area, and the government agreed. That was the first civilian settlement. Others followed, and now there's approximately 500,000 settlers, not including the 200,000 Israelis living in East Jerusalem on 40% of the West Bank. In 2001 and later 2007, Israel offered to limit settlements to less than 10% of the area in the West Bank in exchange for peace. The Palestinian leadership did not accept the offer, even make a counteroffer, and more settlements followed. So this is not the story of an oppressive nation. Another lie. Israel is preventing a two-state solution. No, I just covered that. There's no solution that includes Israel's continued existence, and that's not possible if Hamas remains in political and military control of the Gaza Strip, and Hezbollah maintains control over Lebanon. Hamas has stated its goal unambiguously: the political and military destruction of Israel and the substitution of an Islamic State from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The same is true of Hezbollah and Iran. They have no compromise with what they regard as its religiously mandated delegation. Its leaders and followers are prepared to die and have their families and associates die in order to achieve that goal. They cannot accept any solution short of this final solution as a permanent end of hostilities. They can compromise over ceasefires, prisoner exchanges, and other temporary solutions, but not over the only permissible permanent solution for them, which is the end of any Jewish political presence in what they claim is Muslim, religiously ordained land that can never be part of a Jewish state. Although the Palestinian Authority has thus far refused to agree to a compromise that would create a two-state solution, in principle, it's open to that possibility. Mahmoud Abbas has criticized past Palestinian leaders who rejected the UN partition plan of 1947. I like to think of it as a possibility, but the reality is it's probably not going to happen. All right, Iran is not a barrier to peace. That is another lie. Iran is the key player in its current warfare in the Middle East. It controls Hamas, it controls Hezbollah, it controls the Houthis and other terrorist groups that attack Israel on a regular basis. It has also attacked Israel directly. It controls the ring of fire that surrounds Israel and endangers its security. If Iran were to develop a nuclear arsenal, and that was just abated, these groups would be able to operate from under an Iranian nuclear umbrella, which would make prospects for peace even more distant than it seems today. Unlikely, but the best solution would be a regime change from the mullahs to some form of democracy. The rule of the Shah, which ended in 1979, was not democratic, far from democratic, but that regime did not export terrorism like the current regime does. It also did not seek the destruction of Israel, as the current regime does. Indeed, for all its faults, and really there were many, it cooperated with the United States, Israel, and other nations in the region. Shortly after the religious revolution in 1979, Iran engaged in an 8-year war with Iraq that disrupted the region, followed by many more disruptive actions by Iran that happen today. There's no realistic possibility for an overarching peace in the region as long as Iran remains the primary exporter of terrorism. And if Iran does get nuclear capability, matters will get worse. Moving on. Why does the hard left champion Palestinianism over more righteous causes? Well, in a world in which massive violations of human rights have tragically become the norm, why is the hard left focused on one of the least compelling of those causes, namely the Palestinian leadership? Where's the concern for the Kurds, the Chechens, the Uyghurs, the Sudanese, the Tibetans? There's no campus demonstrations on their behalf, no expressions of concern by the squad, or as I call them, the squat, in Congress, no UN resolutions, no recurring op-eds in the New York Times, and no claims that the nations that oppress these groups have no right to exist. On the merits and demerits of their claims, the Palestinians have the weakest case. They've been offered statehood and independence on numerous occasions, like 1937 to 1938, 1948, 1967, 2000 to 2001, and 2007. Israel ended its occupation of the Gaza Strip in 2005, yet even now, Palestinian leaders refuse to sit down and negotiate a reasonable two-state solution. As the late Israeli diplomat Abba Eban once aptly put it, the Palestinian leadership never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Nor are history and morality on their side. The Palestinian leadership itself aligned with Nazism and Hitler in the 1940s, with Egyptian tyranny and anti-Semitism in the 1950s, and with international terrorism from the 1960s to today. In 1947, the UN divided the land that the Romans called Palestine and the Jews called Yisrael into two areas. It produced a sliver of land along the Mediterranean and a non-arable desert called the Negev to the Jews, who were a majority in the area, and a much larger arable area to the Arabs. The Jews declared statehood on their land, and instead of declaring statehood on their land, the Palestinians and surrounding Arab nations declared war. The Arabs lost, and the Jews captured more land. As a result of the war, there was an exchange of populations. Hundreds of thousands of Arabs left or were forced out of Israel, and hundreds of thousands of Jews left or were forced out of Arab countries and Arab Palestine. Again, in 1967, the surrounding Arab nations threatened to destroy Israel, which preemptively attacked and occupied the West Bank and Gaza, which it immediately offered to return with some territorial adjustments necessary for security in exchange for peace and recognition. The UN Security Council issued Resolution 242, which called for a return of captured territories in exchange for peace. Israel accepted. The Arab nations and the Palestinians, however, issued their three infamous no's. No peace, no recognition, no negotiation. The Kurds have never been offered independence or statehood despite treaties that promised it, nor have the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, or the Chechens. But the Palestinians have on multiple occasions since 1938, almost 100 years ago, when their leader told the Peel Commission that the Palestinians don't want a state. They just don't want there to be a Jewish state. The Palestinian people have suffered more from the ill-advised decisions of their own leadership than from the actions of Israel. Moving back to the present, Hamas and Hezbollah commit double war crimes every time they fire lethal rockets at Israeli civilians from areas populated by their civilians who they use as human shields. Israel responds proportionately in self-defense, as President Biden has emphasized. The IDF, or Israeli Defense Forces, go to extraordinary lengths to try to minimize civilian casualties among Palestinians, despite Hamas's policy of using civilian buildings, meaning hospitals, schools, mosques, and high-rise buildings, to store fire and plan their unlawful rockets and incendiary devices. Yet, the hard left blames Israel alone, and many on the center left create a moral equivalence between democratic Israel and terrorist Hamas. Why? Well, the answer is clear and can be summarized in one word: Jews. The enemy of the Kurds, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, and the Chechens are not, unfortunately for them, the Jews. Hence, there is little concern for their plight. If the perceived enemy of the Palestinians were not the Jews, there would be little concern for their plight as well. This was proved by the relative silence that greeted the massacre of Palestinians by Jordan during Black September in 1970, or the killings of the Palestinian Authority leaders in Gaza during the Hamas takeover in 2007. There's been silence also about the more than 4,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians, killed by Syria during that country's current civil war. It's only when the Jews or their nation are perceived to be oppressing Palestinians and that the left seems to care about them. While the U.S. provides financial support for Israel, we also provide massive support for Jordan and Egypt. Even if the U.S. were to end support for Israel, the demonization of Israel by the hard left really would not end. The left singles out the Palestinians not because of the merits of their case, but rather because of the alleged demerits of Israel and the double standard universally applied to Jews. And that's the sad reality. Former CIA Director John Brennan as much as admitted that this double standard when he complained in a tweet about the alleged lack of empathy by Jews. I always found it difficult to fathom how a nation of people deeply scarred by a history replete with prejudice, religious persecution, and unspeakable violence perpetrated against them would not be the empathetic champions of those whose rights and freedoms are still abridged. As Seth Fronsman, a writer for the Jerusalem Post, aptly put it, in his telling of it, he implied that Jews have special empathy for others, while non-Jews have no special need to be empathetic. Brennan has not held other countries to a higher standard based on the ethnic and religious origins of their citizens. In short, because Jews endure genocide, they have to live their life according to a higher standard than those who perpetrated genocide. The benevolent double standard may sound kinder than the malevolent double standard that imposed by members of the Squad and others. As of now, Palestinians have failed to meet those standards. The legitimate rights of Palestinians to a peaceful state over time should be supported. Not so much because their history and their actions merit it more than others, but because it would be good for peace in the region and for Israel. But it should not be prioritized over other more equally compelling claims just because Jewish people are on the other side. Protesters who claim to be pro-Palestinian should look at themselves in the mirror and ask, why have you prioritized the morally weak Palestinian case over far more just causes? Recently, there was a t-shirt that basically said, I am not interested in the repression of human rights abuses in Syria, Togo, Iran, China, Yemen, Venezuela, Burkina Faso, Somalia, and Eritrea, and basically all these other countries, if there are no Jews involved. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Trust. We are trusted and established in teaching others to protect themselves from physical harm. What if we could also protect your wallet? At Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic programs, safety isn't only about strength. It's about smart choices and peace of mind. With decades of public safety experience, from law enforcement and firefighting to stress resilience coaching, Marcus equips you to stay calm, confident, and in control, no matter the pressure. And now, with our new partnership with Think Energy Plus, we're giving you a chance to protect what matters most, your budget. By switching to cleaner, fixed-rate electric energy and soon-to-be gas, with personalized savings, you're investing in both your safety and your savings. And with AutoSave, you are automatically switched to the lowest energy rate. Whether you are guarding your personal safety or safeguarding your finances, Marcus Melnick and Think Energy Plus are your trusted allies. Discover how to stay safe and save by visiting thinkenergy.plus/Marcus Melnick. That's thinkenergy.plus/Marcus Melnick. After you visit, send your electric bill for a free rate analysis to marcus@firearmmentor.com. Smart protection for your body and your wallet. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and while I was recording this, a news story popped up, and there has been another mass shooting, this one at a Catholic school in Minnesota. And look, guys, I'm Jewish, so I have a Jewish perspective. I don't know any of the prayers and other religions. All I know is my background, and my heart and prayers go out to the victims, whether they were a direct victim and were shot or just terrorized by this. And when this happens in Judaism, we say a prayer called the Kaddish. It is an ancient Jewish prayer sequence in Aramaic, recited with concluding prayers for universal peace. And I'd like to offer a version of that for the people in Minnesota. Yitgadal v'yiktidah shemei rabbah, exalted and holy be your great name. Yet little feels holy today. Another mass shooting and incomprehensible horror. Too many dead and too many wounded, and we are left to mourn the dead and heal the wounded and wonder why. But is this part of God's plan, that death and destruction emerge from the free will you entrusted us to care for each other? That people kill people using weapons that we designed and created with the minds that you gave us. We are taught when Moses and the Israelites stood praying at the shores of the Red Sea while the Egyptian army was bearing down on them, you called out to us and said, "Why are you crying to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." So help us move on, not by forgetting the horror, not by explaining it away, and not by blaming the easy targets, but by having the courage to mourn the dead, heal the victims, and bless the first responders. Lead with love and save lives. Peace that comes because we did not become inured to the continual violence in our houses of worship, our concert venues, our schools, our malls, and our neighborhood. And we did not allow the call for prayers to turn us away from the actions we must take to end mass shootings, but because we did have the courage to stand up, speak up, act out. So one day, this world can be free from violence and will finally reflect on God's exaltedness and holiness. Amen. So my hearts go out to the people who were involved, and it's not just the people who were shot. It's the parents who send kids to school who did not get shot. It's the people that work there. It's the community. There's just a lot of pain, and there's a lot of evil in the world, and my hope is that you don't need my services. My hope is that evil goes away, but in reality, evil's here to stay. Evil's a part of the human condition. It has been a part of the human condition since forever with the human element. So with that said, I don't mean to end the show on a sad note. However, I would like to offer some positive feelings and vibes towards anyone who has been the victim of a crime. And if you don't want to be the victim of a crime, you can always sign up for a concealed carry class. My next class is going to be September 20th and 21st in the northwest suburbs, and you can check it out at firearmmentor.com/classes. Thank you, and we'll talk next week. We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.